like to pose a question, I think, to Jorge, if I can, and then we'll take questions. So I grew up in Kenya for part of my childhood. And in Swahili, there's a saying, I wish I could say it in Swahili, but it's when elephants fight, the grass gets trampled, is a Kenyan saying. And you describe this hegemonic tussle between the US and China perhaps as being the defining characteristic of where we are. When I think about foreign policy, I think about three different pots. I think about the ideological and the moral. I think about the economic, trade and investment and the interests of nations. I think about realism as a way of working in that domain. And then I think of sovereignty. And the point I wanted us to think about maybe a bit is globalization changed the shape of sovereignty, because as the nature of power shifted into the financial, through the growth of multinationals, through the volume of trade between countries, the sovereignty, the independent sovereignty issue became less vibrant, less powerful. And countries then built huge amounts of trade and relationships that related to foreign policy. And then, of course, there are military alliances like NATO and others that are the third pot. So I'm thinking of the moral and ideological, which South Africa maybe engages in, the trade and investment interests, and then just raw power of defending your sovereignty in one or other way. My question to you, Jorge, is you had some fantastic examples in the book, and being a business school, we love case studies. If you have to pick a country now that you think is successfully applying active non-alignment, and a region that you think is particularly coalescing around projecting non-alignment, would you have any response to either of those? A country you think that's excelling in this or has got the concept and is executing it, and maybe a region in the world that you think is well placed to pursue this?
Sure. Good question, Nick. So, a region in the world that is, it seems to me, has been doing very well at this is Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is, obviously next to China. At the same time, it has had long-standing links with the United States. So it has to manage a very tricky situation. And we look at countries like Vietnam, at Singapore, at Indonesia, and at ASEAN as a whole, this entity that brings all 10 Southeast Asian countries under one umbrella. I would argue that they have done very well at managing this very tricky balance. More, closer to South Africa, there's a recent example that is very much in the making. So it is, you couldn't say, that it is a stellar example of success, but it is in the making, and it is close to South Africa, and I think it is relevant. And that is the case of Angola. Angola is a country that has received the most amount of financial cooperation and investment from China, somewhere between 50 in Africa, somewhere between $50 and $60 million. And yet, a couple of years ago, the Angolan government said that we would like to work not just with China, as we have very strongly, but also with the United States. And out of that came, as you may know, the Lobito Corridor project. President Biden, in one of his last visits abroad, was to Angola, and to highlight the contribution that the United States wants to make and is making to constructing the Lobito Corridor that will bring in minerals from Eastern Congo, perhaps even all the way to Zambia, to the Lobito port on the Atlantic Ocean, and from there on to Europe and to the United States, and copper, rare earths, and other minerals.